be an informed home buyer in 2026. My name is Tamara Peacock. I'm an award-winning realtor with Pearson Smith Realty. And before we get started, just wanted to have a quick temperature check of the room. My question is, how confident do you feel right now about the home buying process? So one would be low confidence and five would be very confident. Just go ahead and drop it in the chat. I want to see where we're at, as far as how you feel. Not how nervous you are, but how you feel about the home buying process this moment.
Oh, okay.
Just a little interactive. Okay, three is good. I'll
It's
take a
good.
three. Yeah, three is pretty good. Anyone else want to drop in the chat how they feel about the home buying process right now? Okay. Well, Javon, after this, oh, a 10. Eric, we know you an expert. So this is my lender, y'all. He's the expert. So he's above a five. So that's all right. Yes. All right. So yes, the home buying process is, a big thing and it is a big process, but we're going to break it down so you'll feel more comfortable and more informed after this whole thing is over. And I'm hoping to change that three into a five or a 10 after it's all said and done. So one thing that I want to make clear right now is that you're not to buy anything today. And I don't want you to feel rushed or pressured. My job today is to give you clear answers and honest guidance. And I'm the person who's going to tell you when buying makes sense and when buying doesn't make sense. And a good agent is going to be able to present you with all your options and make sure that you make a good informed decision, especially when it comes to home ownership, because it's about making sure that you feel prepared and not overwhelmed with this process. Okay.
Understood.
So here are a couple of questions that I always hear from buyers. Most of the time it boils down to the prices. Are they good? Are they not? Whether the rates, whether buying is affordable or whether they're choosing the right home. And these questions every buyer has at some point. And I want you to think about your biggest question when it comes to buying a home. Is it related to prices, rates, or affordability? Now, if it's prices, drop one in the chat. Rates, drop two in the chat. Or affordability, drop three in the chat. Okay, all right. I see a lot of affordability. Affordability is a very big thing right now because we have to make sure that we can, be comfortable in our home. So we're definitely going to get into talking about affordability in this presentation. Okay. Now we're going to kind of move into what is happening in our market. So I pulled two different areas. One is Prince George's County, and then I pulled across the bridge, which is Alexandria. But there's some important things to notice about this slide. So the average list price is what sellers put their house on the market and hoping that they'll get, while the average sale price is what the buyers are paying after the negotiations are done. So now when we get to the sale to list price ratio, if this ratio is below 100%, then you have a little bit more room for negotiation in this market, and that means the market is a little bit slower. If this number was above 100%, then that means that there's more competition in the market and that, you may have to be in a situation where you're trying to outbid someone else for a home. Now, when it comes to the average days on market, that's very important to buyers because if this number is low, then that's telling you as a buyer, hey, I might have to move a little quicker. But when you have a number that is a little bit higher, that means that you have more time to think about your purchase and, maybe put in a contract after you had to carefully consider that. So even in the DMV right now, we're still in a balanced market. Sellers aren't getting everything that they're asking for, and buyers aren't getting everything that they're asking for. So that's why we're, more balanced than a seller or a buyer's market. And you hear a lot of people saying, oh, this is a seller market, this is a buyer's market. Right now, we're still in a balanced market. Now, when we're looking at the average inventory, that's kind of important because that determines how many homes are available. So when this number is low, it usually favors the sellers because that means that you don't have as many options out there as a buyer. But when the number is a little bit higher, that means that you as the buyer have more choices. So it's really good to kind of look at these numbers. And when we look at all the numbers, we kind of have to look at them as the whole picture, not just individually, to get an idea of what the market is doing. So this is Prince George's County. We're going to flip over to Alexandria and see the difference. So Alexandria, the average list price is a little bit higher, and the sale price is actually over what people are listing their homes at. So we come up with a sale to list price ratio of over 100%, and that means that we're probably in a multiple offer situation or we're in a hot market. And so they have a little less inventory, and their days on market are a little less than PG County. So that's kind of how I use these numbers to determine how to help my buyers navigate the market. And it's really important, especially when we're trying to figure out what we're up against when we're looking at homes and what the market looks like for us. Okay, when we talk about timing, the truth is there's never a perfect time to purchase a home because buying a home is specific to you and your circumstances and your situation. So a lot of times people will say, I mean, a couple of years ago, they were like, I'm waiting for the market to crash. Well, here we are a couple of years later, and the market still hasn't crashed. So the truth is that the timing isn't perfect for everyone. It just depends on your individual situation because the market is always changing. Rates go up, rates go down, prices change, but you have to be able to be prepared to make a decision on whether it's a good time for you to buy when the opportunity presents itself. So that's my job. And my job is to basically make sure that you're clear on your goals and your limits and make sure that you're not waiting for the perfect condition, but the condition that's perfect for you to purchase. And ultimately, when people regret buying is when they rush into decisions. So that's my job is to make sure that we're not rushing into a bad decision because purchasing a home is a 5 to 10 year commitment easily. All right. So I have my lender, Eric Davis, on the phone, on the call, sorry. And I'm going to turn it over to him and he's going to talk to us all about the one thing that everybody loves to hear about, and that's financing and how to get your money. So, hey, Eric.
Hey, what's going on? Sorry, having some technical difficulties with my laptop, so I've just hopped on from my phone. But I appreciate everybody for attending today, spending some time with us on this beautiful Saturday. I know there's a lot that you could be doing, like brunching, so we appreciate you hanging out with us today. Um, Before I kind of jump into my portion, I guess just I would be curious just to see and do kind of like a pulse check. What's one what's one concern you may have about the financing portion or just the home like getting started as a whole? Like I would just be curious for everyone to just kind of drop maybe one thing before we jump in. Um,
So,
Maintaining,
yeah.
okay. Interest
Mhm.
rates, okay. All right, so that's I think that's good. So, all right, go ahead, Tamara. We could just jump off. I'm gonna keep those two in mind, those two questions or two
Okay.
concerns in mind, and I'll come back to those.
Okay. I'm gonna
Okay.
go to the next slide. Okay.
Okay. All right, perfect. So when it comes out to purchasing a home, right, I think the most important factor to consider is your affordability. Okay. So a lot of times people think that their credit score is the determining factor to what would allow them to qualify for a half a million to a million or whatever your respected desire is. But the truth of the matter is the affordability, right? And what we're looking for is basically what you're currently committed to in regards to your liabilities, right? That monthly commitment, and how does that compare to your monthly gross income? Okay, because when we look at that key factor, is going to help us determine what your debt to income ratio is. Okay, so again, if you don't take away anything from today's call, right, when it comes to your affordability and what you can purchase, the number one factor is your debt to income ratio, which determines your affordability. Okay. Now, your credit score determines more so the interest rate and the loan type that you qualify for. But again, it doesn't matter if you have an 800 credit score. If you know if your liabilities are higher than what you're actually bringing home, then you're not going to be able to afford pretty much anything. Okay. Um, so what my team and I do, and what we love working with Tamara on, is we take a holistic approach. Okay, it's not only just looking at what you could afford on paper, but we're also looking at your lifestyle, right? We're making sure that you have reserves, you have the funds, so that when you get in your home, that you're not just house rich and cash poor, okay? Because what we don't want to do is get you in a home, and then 6 months later, you're reaching out to us, right? Because life happened and something happened unexpected, and then now you're having to seek options in regards to selling or, any type of loan modifications, okay? You go to the next one.
Okay.
All right. So, how many of us heard the myth that you need 20% down? I know I wasn't the only person. Get in, just raise your hand or just drop a yes or a one in the chat, right? This is a common misconception when it comes to the home buying process. And I always like to joke. I also like to joke with people and say, this was the standard when our grandparents were buying, right? Because at that time, their homes were like $10,000. So they were able to put 20% down on $10,000, right? Because homes were cheaper back then, where fast forward, that's not the case, okay? So you have a number of different loan options and loan products that allow you to put, really minimum down, okay? One of the most common is going to be FHA financing, right? So that allows you to put 3.5% down, as well as conventional allows you to put 3% down. And if you qualify for any VA loans, then you don't have a down payment. Okay. Um, Now, a common question I get, so I'm just going to be proactive, even though, like, let's say if you're looking at an FHA or a conventional option, there are also down payment assistance programs that can cover your down payment, right? So in a perfect world, you would be able to use a program to offset your down payment, which essentially makes your financing almost 100%, and you only have to worry about your closing costs. Okay. Any questions about any of that before we move on? And if you do, you could just hop off mute and just ask it. Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. So we could go to the next slide. Okay. All right. So here is a real life example, right, of a home price around 425,000. Okay. So in this scenario, we use 5% down. Again, that's gonna be kind of on the higher of the lower down payment options, right? This would be like a conventional option. Now you see the your down payment or your vested interest would be the 21,000, and then the bank essentially would fund the remainder of that loan. Okay. Now, in this scenario here, this is going to put your monthly payment or your principal and interest payment around 2,500. Okay. Now, the other things to think about when considering like your monthly threshold is um, there's also going to be property. Not only are you paying a principal and interest back, but you also have your taxes and insurances. Okay, so this is kind of always a question or a scenario that we like to build our strategy around. Right, is your mortgage payment is going to be the most important because again, it doesn't really qualify. It doesn't matter if you qualify for like $1 million home, right? If you don't want to make $1 million payment. So what we do is we build your strategy around your monthly payment, and then from there, I'll show you scenarios in regards to what that could allow you. And then, collectively, we would decide, hey, do we need to think about, paying some things down to be able to afford a higher monthly payment, or hey, is this too high? Let's go ahead and reduce that. But all that is kind of what we would do on our strategy call. Okay. Go to the next one.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I want you to think about this, right? When it comes down to actually purchasing and seeing what you qualify for, as a bank, we're really going to look at, four major components, right? Is the monthly comfortability when you with your monthly payment, right? Again, that's the most important. Um, because again, if you're not comfortable with the payment, then it doesn't really matter what you qualify for. Okay. The second is we're going to look at kind of cash on hand, and that's going to be, you know, your checking, you know, what you have in your checking, what you have in your savings. We could also factor things like your retirement accounts. We could also factor in things like your stock portfolio, your crypto portfolio. Um, we can look at all of those things that you can be able to tap into for assets, because then that's going to again allow us the ability to start building a your mortgage strategy, right? Because let's say if we're looking at a scenario where you're considering using like a program, but the program is going to be a higher interest rate, right? And it's going to be a loan anyway, then it might make more sense for us to borrow against ourselves, right? In a form of like our retirement, where you're not going to have to pay that money back, or you're not going to have to take a higher interest rate over the course of 30 years. Okay. So again, those are, one of the two main components when we start building a strategy is we really spend a lot of time around those two things. Okay. Now, three, I think is extremely important is your risk tolerance. Okay. Um, I always tell clients, you know, when you understand your pre-approval range, you don't want to jump straight to the top of it, right? Because you want to allow yourself to be competitive, mainly, right? But then also, it's also important to understand like what your risk tolerance is, right, in regards to your payment, as well as what you're comfortable out of pocket, right? Because as you know, as we get you pre-approved and Tamara starts showing you homes, it's important to understand like what range you want to stay in, so that you're not allowing yourself to feel overwhelmed, right? Because in this market, we do have the flexibility and the luxury of not having like, it's not too crazy, knock on wood, right? It's not too crazy competitive right now compared to a low interest rate market, right? Where there's more buyers, and then now 10 and 15 home buyers are going after the same home, right? And then that is what kind of creates a little more stressful situation in a more competitive situation. So I would say, we always start conversation around your monthly, right? What is that payment desire? And then also like, what is the ceiling on your investment? Like if you come to us and say, hey, 20,000 is the max of what I want to spend, then we need to, really be clear on what's available and what homes and what strategies are going to allow us to keep you within your payment threshold as well as your out of pocket commitment. Okay. And then lastly, timeline, right? I always tell clients like the sooner you can understand kind of what your window and what your mortgage strategy looks like, the better. Right. I always make a joke and say, it's similar to, if you were like me, right, and in college, you were that person that studied the night before the test, right? And once you get through the test, even if you did well, you felt that anxiety, you felt overwhelmed, right? And I tell clients that's the same feeling that you get when you're trying to get pre-approved and do all of this 30 days before your lease expires, right? Because now you're, maybe you never reviewed your finances, maybe you've never really planned, right, to, purchase a home. Now you're trying to do years of previous behavior and conditioned behavior while racing against a 30-day clock, right? So that makes the process extremely stressful. So it's our job to try to get a plan in your hand as fast as possible, so that it gives you some time. So that this way, if you want, to increase your buying power, or, be able to pay off some debt so that you free up some of your disposable income, we have time, right? So that's something that I definitely would love to connect with everyone on the call after, and to help you get a clear understanding of what that looks like, so that when you decide to jump out in the market, you are overconfident. You go to the next one.
Okay.
All right, and then when it comes to kind of like what you should anticipate in regards to like your monetary investment, right? you have really five different components. You have your earnest money deposit, which think about your earnest money deposit more so as like a security deposit, right? So with this security deposit in sense, right, you're putting money once you go under contract, you're putting that earnest money or security deposit down, which then is an indicator to the seller that you're serious about purchasing. Okay. Now that is not a fee, right? It is a credit to you later down the line. So, like, let's say if it cost you 10,000 to purchase your home, right? If you put up 5,000 up front when you went under contract, you would get credit that 5,000. So the day of settlement, the day you go to closing, you only have to bring the remaining five. Okay. Now the other thing you want to you want to prepare for, right, or budget for is inspections. So you have your property inspection, right, and there's also other smaller inspections that can go under that I'll let Tamara kind of touch on. But I would say your inspection budget probably should range. I would say anywhere between what do you say, like 3 and 700, depending on
Yep,
where you're buying.
that's
Okay.
true. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So I'll say about 3 and 700. And again, that is a service that you have to prepay, right? Because you want to have this done because again, you're taking over an asset that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? So you want someone to go in, you want someone to look at the condition, they look at the mechanicals, look at the plumbing, look at the electrical, and make sure the roofing, right? And make sure that there's no issues prior to you taking ownership, okay? Because once you take ownership, anything that comes with that house is your problem now, right? So you want to really use that time to have a clear understanding of the condition of the property that you're taking ownership of so that you can feel confident, right? And then also it'll let you know of what kind of repairs or things you should consider that will allow you to then create a budget for it. Okay. So you have your property inspection, and then um the third is going to be your appraisal. So your appraisal is another form of an inspection. Is this one is a little bit different. It's different in the sense that you're having a third party come out to assess the actual value of the home, okay? Where your inspection, they're coming out to look at the physical condition of your home to make sure that there's no hazardous issues, that the your roof ain't gonna cave in, and that type of things. Where the appraiser is really coming out to say, hey, based off of the homes that close, this is your value, right? This is justifiable value, and you're not overpaying. So I always tell clients, like, think about this is really like a safety net as a buyer, because this gives you confidence that you're not overpaying for something, right? I'm sure we heard those crazy stories that happened 07, 08, right? When people were buying homes for 500,000 and then they were only really valued at 400,000, and a lot of that was because there was a lot of corruption with values back then, right? So there's been a lot put in place to be able to safeguard that for you as a consumer, so you're not overpaying, okay? And then again, the bank is not going to give you more money than that property is worth, okay? Now the good thing is if the property comes in over, then congratulations, because you're actually walking into equity, right? It's like you prepaid yourself, you gave yourself a gift. That's how I like to think about it, right? But again, if it comes in under, then that's when um, it would allow Tamara to go back to the listing agent and say, hey, you probably need to drop this price if you want us to stay in this deal because it's not worth that. Okay. And then lastly, again, was the down payment, right? So you have your wide range of down payment options. If you are eager to put 20% down, we do those loans as well. For me, I think financially it just makes more sense, especially with your first home, to just get in with what you need, right? And then I would rather you have more money for furnishing, for savings, for reserves, so that God forbid if something happens, right? Like, you know, your job lays off or whatever the case may be, you have those reserves to be able to pay your mortgage versus you putting a large down payment and then only saving yourself a couple $100. I know we ran through a lot. What questions can I answer for anyone?
Anyone have any questions for Eric?
Don't go easy on me
I,
now.
I this Mr. Jackson just wanted to know, as far as like using my business, is that an option or is that a smart option for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you have a a steady 9 to 5 like salary position, right, and you have your self-employed business, I always try to advise clients to see what you would qualify with the stable income, right? Because again, this is America, right? And with being a business owner, you get the privilege and the opportunity to be able to save a lot tax wise that way, right? So, with being a business owner, I understand that a lot of times what we make don't always reflect what we're showing on paper, right? Because again, we're
Yeah,
trying to maximize our tax savings. So I would say when we look at this, when we look at your strategy, we could take a look at it and say, hey, it may not make sense for us to introduce your business income, right? It might make sense for us to just qualify you off of your steady income. But again, that's something that is more subject is to from person to person. But we could definitely do a deeper dive on our strategy goal.
understood. Okay.
Okay.
Good question. What other questions?
Well, Eric, I often get the question of a lot of people, especially new to the process, confuse closing costs with their down payment or their earnest money. Can you kind of
Yeah,
tell us
yeah.
what the difference is?
Yeah, so really you got to think about purchasing a home. There's two costs, okay? Again, your earnest money deposit, think about it as a down payment, as a credit that you're going to get later, okay? Um, your down payment is essentially your vested interest into the transaction, okay? So that's something that typically has to come from you, a family member, or a program that is subsidizing your down payment, okay? Um, this is kind of the bank's way to getting you to buy into the transaction, right? So you have some ownership stake in it. Okay. So that's one cost. Okay. The second is going to be closing costs. Okay. So your closing cost is going to be broken up really into like three parts. And I want you to think about your closing costs is really like the cost of doing business or the cost of transferring the property from the current owner to you as the new homeowner. Okay. And the three costs or three breakdowns that make up your closing costs, you're going to have one is your escrow accounts. Okay. Now, think about escrows in the sense of like a savings account. Okay. So before you can tap into your savings, you have to fund it. So what we do as part of your closing costs, we fund this account to be able to pay things like your property taxes, as well as your homeowner's insurance. Okay. And this is important because when you're paying your mortgage, unlike rent, right, where you're prepaying for the month and then you're living in it, with your mortgage, you're paying in arrears. So you're really paying for last month. Okay. And it's important that we set up this escrow account for you so that you don't have any lapse in payments with things like with your taxes or your insurance, because then that can cause liens on the property, right? And with the bank pretty much contributing or covering most of the purchase, that the bank requires that escrow account to kind of protect their investment in a sense. Okay. And then also I always tell clients like it's good because when you go into home ownership, there's a lot of moving parts and things that you don't really think about. So having that escrow account where you're not having to pay taxes yourself, it is definitely one less thing you have to worry about. Okay. So you have your escrows, you have your prepaids. Now, prepaids are going to be things like when you get into your home, you have homeowners insurance. You have to prepay for that first year. So, if I'm sure if you had car a car insurance, they allow you to prepay for 6 months, right? Or you pay up front instead of you paying it out of your pocket. We just add it to your closing costs because again, that's something that the bank requires to protect their investment. Um, Other prepaids that you should think about or know, right, is when you when you buy a home, you can normally pay your property taxes really in one of two ways. You could do semi-annually, or um you could do annually, right? You're just paying it up front. So when you're buying a house from someone, if they have prepaid their taxes for the year, right? And let's say what we're in May, right? So if you're buying a house from me and I pay my taxes up for the year, you have to reimburse me for the 7 months I already prepaid. Okay. So that's a part of your closing costs. And then lastly is going to be your title related fees. So your title company is going to be introduced once you go on the contract. And I want you to think about really the home buying process in like three people, right? So Tamara is going to be everything related to negotiating, right, and advising from a sense of boots on the ground with you, right, on a daily day. Myself, the bank, the mortgage lender, we're going to be everything financially for you, okay? Where title is going to be everything legal for you, okay? So when you're buying a house, you want to make sure that the title that you're receiving, all of the docs prior to you taking ownership, that it was handled correctly. Because unlike any other debt liabilities that you take on, right, it normally follows your social security number. It's not like that with real estate. So if something is missed in the transfer status, and let's say you're purchasing my home, I had my roof done, but I didn't pay the roofer, they can file a lien on the property. And if it's not properly caught prior to me selling it to you, guess who got to pay that mechanic or that roofer? You, right? So your title company is extremely important. They're also going to be the 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 kind of middle party in regards to the buy and the sell side to make sure everything is moving fairly and everybody is upholding their contract in the respects of what's in the contract. And then they're also going to be the ones that are helping you sign all of the documents the day that you go to settle. And again, they're going to be the ones that if anything happens in regards to updates you need on your deed, um, anything like if the property was put in a will but it wasn't properly disclosed, like that would be your first line of defense to protect you of everything from a legal standpoint. Did I did I do good with that?
Yeah, no, that was
Yeah.
very good. Yep.
Okay.
Because
All
it's
right.
definitely important.
Okay.
So I just want to, make sure that we don't have any more questions for Eric because we're going to continue on. We're going to get to the buying process. So did anybody have any additional questions for Eric?
It's a quiet group. Y'all better ask y'all questions now.
What? Oh, just one more quick question. What determines like? Do they look at you like your savings? I mean, I know you had touched on it briefly, but what's the determining factor? What's in your savings or what's in your check? Pretty much.
What determines your savings? Say that one more time.
The determining factor, like your savings or your checking account, what plays a major part in like what they're
So we
looking at
don't
as far as
so
the loan or
we don't really
purchasing.
yeah, so we don't really prioritize like there's not like a pecking order of what's most important. It's really what's disposable to you, right? So again, let's say, if you're the type of person that, you don't really keep a lot in your check-ins because you have a high yield savings, right? You want to earn a little bit money on your money, or you have most of it in like a stock or crypto account, right? And you're kind of treating that as like a savings. As long as you can liquidate it and you can access it, we just look at that in totality, right? So if you have, it doesn't really matter if you have
Mhm.
50,000, 20,000 spread over four different asset classes. We just look at the accumulative. We look at the total amount.
Understood. Okay.
I'm gonna put the ladies on the spot. I mean, Yvonne right now dominating the questions. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
They might be a little advanced than me. I don't know more advanced.
Uh, we
Pardon the
all are
question.
here to learn.
Okay. Well, ladies.
No, but that's good. But again, I'll be monitoring the chat while you go through, Tamara. So if there's anything that anybody want to drop in, I can answer that for you as well.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Eric. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate the
Of course.
information.
Of
Thank
course. Thank you, Eric.
you.
Of course.
Okay, so we're going to pick back up and we're going to kind of break the buying process down a little bit, but we're going to simplify it into 5 steps. So, buying a home, we start with preparation and strategy, and Eric kind of mentioned that as well. We're going to sit down, we're going to find out what your must-haves are, the things you can live or live without. And the reason that home buying sometimes feels a little overwhelming is because people don't really know what to expect next. A lot of times the pre-approval gets pushed as that very first step, but really step number one is sitting down with me, sitting down with someone like Eric, and basically going through, what we can do to get you prepared to buy. And when you have a clear idea of what your goals are, it makes it easier and it makes the process a little bit comfortable. But don't get me wrong, this process can be a little overwhelming. Once we get the preparation and strategy set, then we move to our pre-approval, and that's where Eric and his team are going to sit down and walk you through all of your financing options and really set in place your budget through that pre-approval letter. And we use that to actually know what our price range is and go out and start doing number three, which is searching and touring homes. And that's the exciting part that buyers really look forward to. That's when you're going to come in and you're going to say, hey, I want to do this. I like this. I don't like that. And we get to actually put boots on the ground and go out and look at the properties. And that stage is really exciting because, we're out there basically finding your next home. And after you say, Tamara, this is the one, we're going to move into making an offer. So that's where our negotiation and our strategy comes in. And that's where I come in to negotiate the best deal for you. Now, I help you to determine what we're going to offer as far as numbers. I help you to determine what our terms would be and also presenting it to the seller. And if the seller does accept our offer, then that becomes our contract, which is legally binding. And we move into our step number 5, which would be our inspections and appraisals. And Eric touched on this. This is that information phase. So this is where we're finding out about what's going on with the house and also making sure that the price we're offering is a price that is competitive in that neighborhood and in that area. So once we do all of that, we're headed towards the big day where you get your keys, and that is closing day. And closing day is just the culmination of a series of well-guided steps by me and my teammates to help you get to that process where you get your keys in hand and you're opening that door. So I'm gonna ask a quick question. You can drop it in the chat. What part of this process currently has you a little bit nervous or sounds a little intimidating right now? Is it number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And you can drop it in the chat. Okay. All of it? Okay, that's fine. That's what we're here for. We are here to make it less overwhelming, and I understand. Anybody else got it? Which one of these is like the biggest, like nerve-wracking, scary thing? Vernay said 3, the search and the tours. Searching and touring can be overwhelming, most definitely, because you're seeing a lot of information. Sometimes we call it analysis paralysis, where we're kind of like looking at so many things and trying to figure out which one is going to be our next home. So, it's all right. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to make this process as not overwhelming as possible. So, we're
I
going
have a
to
question. I have a
sure,
question.
sure.
I don't know if you guys talked about this. I've been kind of on and off, but a lot of the problem is definitely the down payment. So I was just kind of curious in regards to the down payment assistance opportunities that the DMV does offer. Is that a grant? Does it have to be repaid back? What are some of the pros and cons with that?
That's a
So,
that's a really, really good question.
yeah.
So dependent, and again, it's really gonna. There's a lot of different things that go into it, right? So depending on what state you're buying in, what county. There's different programs that are true grants, right, which are forgivable. And then you have some that are provided to you in a form of like a second mortgage, right? And it could be no interest, it could be interest. So it's really going to one determine on the person and where they're purchasing. And that's something that I can kind of discuss, and go a little bit deeper on once we connect kind of offline.
Denise, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that that's one of the bigger fears is that we know we don't have to put 20% down, but some of us don't even have the 3.5 or 5% down because we're just kind of trying to get by and we don't want to pay rent anymore. So it's just kind of always good to know the type of programs that's offered. And I know here in California, we have something called CalHFA, which is a down payment assistance program. It is a silent lien, and it's due when you sell or you refinance. But a lot of people, especially on social media, they claim that they didn't know, even though they have to take a class.
Mm.
They claim that they don't know. So it's just kind of very important to really kind of drive that home that this nothing is free. Nothing's free.
That is so good, right? I always tell people it's America, right? So nothing is free, right? You're gonna pay in some capacity. And even with some of the grant options, right, that are forgivable, the exchange is again, it's not free because the exchange might be you taking a higher interest rate.
Mm.
So you're paying more if you don't make any changes to the loan over the life of the loan by taking the grant money. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like a give or take, right? Like you have to understand what makes sense for you, right? It's really, would you rather pay now or later? If you're not in a position to pay now, then you're gonna have to pay later, and that's okay, right? Because the beautiful thing about buying a home is it's gonna appreciate in value. So really, what we do is try to coach clients into thinking about like, yeah, I might have to pay it back once I refinance, but really it's just me pulling my equity from the future to today to be able to leverage that.
Okay. Kenise, that was good for you?
That was it. Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick question. Are you aware of any grants in the DMV area that do not have to be repaid?
Yeah, so like if you're looking in like PG County, pathway to purchase is one that doesn't. The only caveat with that is you have to hold the property for 10 years. So it every year kind of a portion falls off. Baltimore City has a ton of different grant programs. I want to say it might still be available. Montgomery County has another one that's like normally like 25,000. That's a grant. Um, and then you have some like if you're looking at Frederick, they have a few smaller ones. But again, once we kind of narrow down the area that you're looking at, we can then go deeper on what's available for that state, for that county. And then what we do is I'll put them on a presentation for you, right? And be able to line them up side by side and say, these are the pros and cons, right? This is a true grant versus a loan, right? And then kind of walk you through what that looks like in regards to your monthly payment, to your out of pocket, right? And then also help you align that with how long you really think that's you're going to be in the home or have this as your primary, right? Because someone that is looking to hold the property forever, I mean, to me, I don't really care what the stipulation. I'm holding this property forever anyway. So I would rather take the option that I don't have to contribute upfront, and then with
How
the
you?
idea.
I'm
Did you
okay.
say?
Hey,
What is?
Javon.
You
I
good?
think
You feel the same?
we can hear you. I think you're not on mute, Javon.
Tamara, I
I
think you
am.
can mute him,
Oh,
actually.
I am so sorry.
it's
You good?
okay.
That was my neighbors.
I
My
think
neighbors are homeowners.
Yeah,
I'm on the Zoom.
tell them to get on the call. Um,
I'm on
um,
the Zoom.
But I think it again it just really depends, right? Because again, someone that is their strategy is to hold a property long term versus short term, it might not make sense for you to look at a down payment assistance program because some of them also kind of prohibit you from being an investor. So there's a lot of different layers. It's not like a one size fit all when it comes to your loan options, to the grant option, right? Everything is going to be subject to the individual, almost like your fingerprint, right? Like your scenario, your financial makeup is going to be different than your mom's, your brothers, because everybody is their financial identity is different.
Bernae, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
I saw you. I appreciate you trying to sneak your question in there after being silent.
He said the ladies had to do something, so I thought
Right,
I'd
y'all stepped up, and I appreciate that. Y'all rose to the challenge. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Eric, for that. So we're going to talk about a little bit of, when we go out and look at properties, it can feel overwhelming at times. And my job basically during our strategy call is to basically help you to get clear on what your priorities are when you're looking for a home and to help you feel like the search is more manageable. So we'll go out, you get a detailed property report on each property so that way you can kind of compare and contrast when you're looking at a lot of properties, it's always helpful to have something in paper to remind you, take notes of what you liked about one property and compare one to the next one that we see. So we'll definitely do that and help evaluate what would be the best home for you and your specific family and your situation. So let's talk about winning offers, something I love to do. Usually, a lot of buyers assume that the highest price wins, but that's not always necessarily the case. We have to consider terms, we have to consider timing, and most importantly, when sellers are evaluating our offer, they're definitely going to be asking one question, more than likely one question only, and that is whether this offer is going to make it to the closing table. And they want to feel confident that they're going to pick the offer with the most likelihood that they can hand over those keys to the new occupant. So that's why it's important for us to have a full picture, not just price, but a full picture of, just what we can do to make ourselves competitive when presenting our offer to the seller. So that's what I do. That's my job, is to negotiate that.
Can I add one thing that I think is remiss as well? Is representation matters, right? Like working with the right team. Honestly, real estate is a relationship business, and that could be the difference of you winning a deal or not, right? Working with an agent like Tamara, that's a monster negotiator, right? Has amazing reputation, that's super knowledgeable, right? If you're working with her and her offer is on the table and you're competing against someone, that agent doesn't have the same experience, doesn't have the same reputation, the listing agent or the selling agent, like the listing agent can take both offers back to their seller and say, hey, I know Tamara, she does really great work. This is why we should go with this offer, even if it's less than the other offer because of the reputation. So again, it's not always about the highest. It's also about the reputation of the people that you work with. Because I can assure you, if I'm competing against someone that is out of state, that's not local, right? And that's Rocket Mortgage, something like that. 9 times out of 10, my clients win those days.
Yep, and it's a team effort, definitely. So one thing, and like Eric mentioned, we work well together and we work for your best interest. But the one thing that I will never do is I'm not going to recommend an offer that I wouldn't feel comfortable with myself. That just goes to speak to the integrity of the situation. My job is to continuously advocate for you throughout the process. And so that's extremely important. I'm going to be open, I'm going to be honest and share with you what I think about the offer. And, ultimately it is your decision, but we want to make sure that you're comfortable with an investment that could be 5 to 10 years down the road. So this offer, if it's accepted, is going to be an actual contract. So we want to make sure that you feel comfortable. And when you feel comfortable, it helps you to feel confident more so in your decision. So that is... Now, here's the thing. We want to, be competitive, but we don't want to panic. So right now, I want to ask you to do one thing. I want you to write down two things that you know right now would make you walk away from a home. So pretend we're going out and you're seeing this home and we walk in the door, and it could be the pricing. It could be maybe there are some roof issues that we notice as soon as we walk in the door. So pick two things and just write them down. You can keep them to yourself of what would make you walk away from a home. And I'll give everybody like 30 seconds. Okay, everybody good to go? Give me a thumbs up. All right. Okay. So you wrote down two things. So here's the deal. It's important to know that if you're emotional about a home, typically it's going to drive overpaying, and that's not what we want. So we want you to be, I want you to be able to say, okay, these are the things that are deal breakers for me. And those two things, keep those in your back pocket, because when we go out and look at homes, we're going to be able, to pull that out of our back pocket and remind ourselves, if this home has this, I feel good about walking away from it, because walking away is not necessarily a loss for you. That's actually a strong position for you to put yourself in, because you're not feeling compelled to purchase something that you're not feeling comfortable with. So, yes, keep that in your back pocket, because when we go out looking for homes, we're going to need to know, what are our walk away things? What are we feeling like we can stay in control of, and what we're going to be able to, walk away from if we see something in a house that we see. Okay, so Eric kind of touched on inspections, and I'm just going to go a little bit more in detail. When we go out and we get our contract and it's accepted by the seller, we're going to have a home inspection, and that home inspection is going to get a report sent back to us with some findings. Now, I'm going to be totally honest. I have been in this business for several years, and I have never gotten a home inspection back with zero findings, because there is no perfect homes out there, you guys. And once we get that report back from the inspector, I'm going to go over it with you. We're going to identify the things that they identified, and we're going to use that as some negotiation leverage to go to the seller and say, hey, we found these things. Are you willing to repair them? Or are you willing to provide us with money so we can, a credit so we can repair it ourselves? Or if it's just something that let's say the foundation is crumbling, that can be extremely expensive. We have the option to what we call exercise our inspection contingency, and we can pull out of the contract and go and find you something without a crumbling foundation. So inspections are extremely important, because they show you what's going on with the house ahead of time, so you can kind of make an informed decision if you want to pursue that purchase further. And so I am here as your expert to kind of help you go through that report, so that you know what you're getting yourself into before we even make it to the settlement table. Okay, now the next thing that we touched on a little earlier is appraisals. So appraisals are a third-party evaluation of the value of that home. So when the appraisal comes back, as Eric mentioned before, if it comes back higher, that's an amazing thing. I love to hear that. That means you are walking into automatic equity and you are a rock star. But sometimes the appraisal comes back a little bit lower. And when the appraisal comes back lower, that's when I, as your agent, goes out to the seller and lets them know, hey, you're asking for 450,000, the house appraised for 400,000. We're going to want you to lower that price for my client to 400,000. And the seller has the option to do that, or we can walk away from the contract. I will say that in my last two sales, the appraisal came back at the price that I offered for my clients. That's because usually I'll do my research to make sure that we're offering a reasonable price for that area or that neighborhood. And that's by pulling the comparable sales in that area before we even submit an offer, so we know what the property may be coming back as an appraisal. But like I said, my last two sales, they came back at appraised value. One of them was listed higher. We were able to get the seller to lower that price, and my buyers were extremely happy. So that's good representation. Will help you get a really good deal, especially when it comes down to the appraisal report. So that's something that we would discuss once we get that information back. But appraisal art is definitely one of those negotiation tools in the entire process. Now, we need to talk a little bit about panic week. So, panic week is when your emotions are like in high alert, especially after the inspection comes back and you review all of those things that we have to negotiate for the seller to fix. And it's a little bit before the appraisal, but it's also right before we get to the closing table. So it's very normal for people to kind of get a little nervous during this time. And if you get to the process and you're feeling a little nervous, it's okay, because the thing is, the closer you get to the settlement table, the more your feelings are going to be a little bit all over the place and they're going to shift. And that doesn't mean that anything's wrong. It's just expected in the process. So let's expect panic week. But right now, I want you to take a pen and paper out and just list out what is one of your biggest fears. And you don't have to share it in the chat. This is just for you, about the buying process. Because sometimes when we put our fears out there or put it on paper, it takes the power away. And listen, even if you've bought a house 10 times, no house purchase is ever the same. And so it's my job as your realtor to make sure that I am walking you through the process, walking you through your options, and helping you to make an informed decision that you're comfortable with for years to come, because it is a long-term commitment. Okay. So, what is my role as your agent? We all know that buying a home is one of the biggest commitments that you'll probably ever make financially. And I want to guide you from the beginning, the preparation part, to through all of it to the closing table and through all of the process and even after. And my job is to be the advocate for you and fighting for your best interest throughout the whole process. So I'm going to be looking at the contracts to make sure that they're fair and in your best interest. I'm going to make sure that we meet our deadlines. Once we go under contract, there's going to be a lot of deadlines that we have to keep up with. You don't need that stress. Let me worry about that. And I'm going to make sure that when we go out to properties, I'm looking for that mold in the corner or that weird smell and trying to figure out, okay, what is this? And my buyers are not going to pay for this if this is, something weird. But basically, I'm responsible for negotiating and making sure that everything gets managed adequately behind the scenes. So I always say my job is not to just open doors, but my job is also to make sure that you don't make a huge six-figure mistake. So that's my role as your realtor. Now, there are next steps that we could take. These are a couple of them, but one thing to know about the home buying process is there is not one timeline that fits everybody. So I want to ask y'all to do a little something, write something down based on what you learned today. Just write down one small step that you can take within the next week to get you closer to your home buying journey. Or, you can even write it in your phone or on a piece of paper, because realistically, progress is just one step at a time. And this one little step we're just going to take over the next week, whether it be getting clear on your numbers with Eric, or whether it be asking questions. I'm always here for questions, or building a plan, or determining what are the things that need to be in place for you to feel comfortable moving forward with your home purchase. And whether it's now or in the next year or in the future, we are here because we want to help you move towards your home purchase goals. Okay, and if you're ready to build your plan, you can set up a strategy session with me. And Eric has dropped his information in the chat if you're ready to move forward to discuss your financing options. And also, we can set you up a custom home search so we can kind of start seeing what's out there and kind of developing our haves and must haves and what we don't need or what we do like in a property. So you can just scan the QR code at the bottom and, set up some time to get on my calendar. And you can also see Eric's availability. He dropped the link in the chat.
So what I dropped is two links. So I dropped the website that if you want to book a call, just want to get information, like that's the best place to go. But I would highly encourage everybody just to take the 3 minute quiz that I dropped before that, right? Because that again, it's no pressure, it's no credit pull, but this just kind of gives you an idea of where you are, right? And then give you a little bit of confidence on how you need to move forward. And again, it's 3 minutes. It's you a simple drop down, and there's no credit pulls, there's no commitments. But again, it just gives you a better sense of where you are.
And that's the information is both of those links are now in the chat. So first of all, my goal today wasn't to get you to buy a house. It was really about educating and hopefully making you a little bit more confident about the buying process. So remember that score that we did at the beginning. I want you to think about it now. And if you feel comfortable dropping it in the chat, what's your score right now that you have gone through this home buyer masterclass? All right, Renee said a 5. Cool. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Eric's still at 10. Yes, he's the expert. So you should be at least a 15 by now. Okay, Javon, we moved up. All right, I feel good. This was successful. Javon gave me a 4. All right, I appreciate it. Okay, so the last a 7, Nakia. All right, cool. Well, I'm glad 7. Yes, come on for the 7. All right. Well, it has been a pleasure. I thank you all for joining me and Eric today on a Saturday. And like I said, whenever you decide the timing is right for you, we're here for you, whether it be today, tomorrow, or sometime down the road. And as always, I'm always a resource. You can see my ways to contact me on this slide. And like I said, thank you so much for being in here. And if you want to ask questions about anything that we've covered today, I'm just opening the floor up for a little Q&A. If you have any questions, we can answer for you. Don't everybody come off of mute at once. Okay. Wait, I guess we did a good job because nobody has any questions. Well, that's so amazing. If you do come up with any questions after this, feel free to reach out to us. We're always
You
here
did
to
a
help.
good job.
Oh,
You
well,
did,
thank
yeah.
you, Kenise.
Amazing.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was going to ask, was it 1 to 5 or was it 1 to 10?
1 to 5, but it's all right.
Okay. Okay.
We'll take it. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, I will definitely look forward to working with each and every one of you. And like I said, I appreciate you all being here. If you have any questions or want to reach out later, my website and my email are in this slide. And I'll also send out these slides after this presentation for you to have them for any future reference you need. Thank you, everyone. Y'all enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you so much.
Happy
Thank
Saturday.
you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.